I'm Francesca Donnellan. Welcome to Becoming More Human, the podcast. Every generation, through its arts and creativity, explores the same questions. Who am I and what really matters? We are so often taught how to emulate others, to make other people happy. But how do we access what's good for ourselves and be strong enough to actually claim it? It's a constant practice because we all keep evolving. There are no limits to personal growth. You can start your journey today and get closer to discovering your true self. Give back to the people around you and make the world a better place.
Hello listeners, on today's episode I'm talking with Rachael Welford, an alternative therapist and coach, the founder of Happy Habits Club, a sound healer, and the host of the podcast, Things I Wish I'd Known. Rachael focuses on empowering women to heal so they can live from a place of inner power and happiness. Her life-changing strategies, sound healings, and wisdoms are in demand from companies like Selfridges, Vans, TikTok, Spotify, and Weetabix. She's been featured as an expert in anxiety, depression, and mindset in the mainstream press and on podcasts like Frankie Bridges' Open Mind. Rachael was voted one of London's best alternative therapists by Time Out magazine. This episode comes with a trigger warning as Rachael shares her incredible story of overcoming burnout, depression, anxiety, PTSD, and suicide. We are so honoured to have Rachael on the show today. So enough from me, and let's jump straight in.
Hello, listeners. My name is Rachael Welford, and I am the host of Things I Wish I'd Known podcast and the founder of Happy Habits Club, which is essentially a non-judgmental space for women who are looking at self-development and they want to be living happier and healthier lives. And I guess my job title, the thing that people say or what people say about me is that I have very infectious energy. And I guess my kind of title is that I'm a women's anxiety coach and therapist. And I live in London. And I'm just super passionate about what I do. I really, really love it. I love the transformation in the people that I work with. I love empowering women to just realize their incredible nature and how unique they are, and that, you know, through little habits. And habits, to me, I know it's tricky because habits sound really boring, don't they, to me as well. They're a bit like, oh God, it sounds like something you've got to do. But actually, if you can just have like little choices, like little compassionate choices that you make for yourself every day that become habits, you don't necessarily need to have these big things, you know, to change your life. It can be these little compassionate choices that you make every day that can literally turn your whole life around and change your life.
That's so true. And I love what you said at the beginning about your infectious energy. Before we even came on to record, I think we've been talking for at least nearly an hour. You are, I mean, infectious. I can feel it through the internet, through the technology. So I'm really excited to, I guess, unpack a little bit more about who you are, because, you know, without a doubt, everything you've just mentioned is hugely transformational for so many people. And the work that you do out there, coaching, especially coaching other women and men, I'm sure as well, especially in the workforce. And I know you do a lot in corporations and, you know, working with such a huge plethora of people. Yeah. How did you get to this point to be able to sort of find your passion in life? Did you experience a time when you felt sort of challenged by life? Did anything particularly happen to sort of bring on this change in you, or have you always known this was your life path?
Oh God, no, this was not my life path. I've had a very checkered past. I mean, I've always had lots of energy. I'm not diagnosed, but I would eat my hat if I haven't got ADHD. My poor parents. I struggled quite a lot at school. I really, really hated school growing up, and I got bullied quite badly. And I found dealing with my emotions like really, really difficult.
In what sense?
And I used to get, you know, I don't know. I just couldn't regulate. You know, what I now know is what I would talk to my clients about as like emotional regulation, like being able to notice an emotion and kind of manage that emotion or master that emotion. I just didn't have any of that kind of capability. So I would get, very, very, very excited and then very, very, very sad or very, very, very angry. And sometimes like almost in a rage fit over something that was really quite, like minor, something like someone would just say a quip and I'd be like, and I didn't really have any control over that. And I think that probably made it quite difficult for me, but also for other people, because who wants to be around somebody that's kind of a little bit, great when they're in a really good mood and really fun. And I think it's still like that to an extent now. Like if I have this really infectious energy, but if I'm pissed off, that's also really infectious because it's part of the course. So school was kind of like difficult for me, and I mean, we'll get into it a bit more, I guess, as we go along. But I had I've lost a lot of people in my life. I've had a lot of death and a lot of grief and a lot of what I now would call, again in therapy with clients, adverse life experiences, which, to be honest with you, I just thought everybody's life was like that. It was only when I started therapy.
Right. That was
because you don't know.
You don't know. And what age would you be when this sort of all happened to you?
I mean, by the time I was about 15 or 16, probably 5 people that were very close to me had already died.
And died through shocking circumstances or through...
Some in shocking circumstances, some,
they passed away.
Like because they were sick or old or, but quite a few in shocking circumstances. And, and then that just continued. So, but I just thought it was really normal. And lots of my people that I hung out with and stuff, they were having pretty harrowing life stuff, people that were pregnant in their teens or having to have terminations, or, one person that was close to me, we found out that, she had some abuse from her grandfather, and it's just lots of things like that. But at the time, I didn't really think. Not that I didn't think they were big things. Of course, those are big things, but I just thought that was just normal life, and that's what everybody goes
you would
through,
do at that age,
and that's just growing up. Yeah. And so by the time I kind of got to like my later teens and early 20s, I was, really just, I don't know, carrying around all this stuff, I think. And I didn't realize that's what I was doing. I was just living. And then I got really into like event management. I loved running events. I loved kind of putting on experiences for people. And when I don't even know how old I was now, but I tried to take my own life when I was really young. I was about 13, I think, or 14. I can't remember the first time. And, back then nobody was talking about mental health. Nobody really understood it in the way that we seem to understand it now. I know there's still a lot more work to be done in that area, but at least the narrative is out there, the conversation's out there. People didn't really talk about depression. Women might have nervous breakdowns or that kind of thing, but it wasn't really like, men didn't seem to have problems because they were just strong men, and women, if they did have a problem, were neurotic or had a nervous breakdown because they were just a bit weak and they couldn't. So the narrative was completely different in the 80s and 90s and early 2000s to how it is now. So I went off to uni and I came back and I started working in like events.
Were you aware?
So I worked in the BMX industry.
Just to go back, Rachel, for a minute, in that early teenage years, when you're sort of 13, 14, and were you aware that you were wanting to sort of take your own life, and were you aware of the emotions and everything that was coming up, or were you just reacting on an impulse and it was the only way you thought you could get out at that time? Or, how did that sort of thought process come about?
I don't think there was much thought behind it. I've been suicidal a number of times now in my life, so I kind of understand that space, at least from my perspective. It might be different for other people. I wouldn't ever speak for everybody, but for me, it's this kind of like, I just can't do this anymore. It's too exhausting.
Right.
So it's like, and I think that comes down to what in ADHD terminology they call masking. So because you're aware that your behavior is different to other people's behavior, you spend a lot of your time, and I definitely resonate with this, but only looking back, hindsight's a beautiful thing, isn't it? Obviously, I didn't have this insight when I was a teenager, but looking back, I never felt like I fitted in. I always thought my friends hated me. They only hung out with me because it was like a default thing or something. I didn't really know why they would want to be hanging out with me. I had very low self-esteem. But I was very good at masking. So I was very good at pretending that I was like really happy and had all my shit together. And, I managed to, I hated school. I hated studying. I hated the whole thing. I still managed to get pretty good grades because I would just cram the night before. I was able to hold a relative amount of information in my brain for a short period of time and then regurgitate it. I still have that practice now. If I'm doing
so you learned that skill early on.
And that skill early on, I still use it now. If I'm doing a talk, often I'll have like the bones of what I want to talk about or what have you, but usually it's the day before or the night before that I really flesh out exactly what I'm going to do, because if I do it too far in advance, I just won't remember. It doesn't matter how many times I practice. If I try and do something verbatim, or I try and like memorize something, it just won't happen. So that's part of my process now. I'm at peace with it. I used to get annoyed with myself and think, why don't you just prepare? And I'm like, well, maybe that is how you prepare. That's fine. Just give yourself the day before to do it. So it was kind of going through, I guess, all of that. And then obviously there's the whole usual teenage thing, like we're all finding our way in the world, aren't we? And we all don't really know what the hell's going on, and the hormones and all that kind of stuff. So it was tricky. Growing up I found very, very tricky. And then I started working in like the BMX industry, which I loved, but it was very high octane, as you can imagine, especially in the 90s. It was really that time. Like, I don't know if anyone's seen, what was that Netflix documentary that was about Woodstock 99 or whatever it was? Or
yes,
seen it? So that kind of, when I watched it, I was like, oh, that was sort of like my life.
Chaos.
That was like my life for like a few years. So that was pretty
just slightly out of control, drunk,
really out of control. And I was running these big sort of BMX events, and we would build all of our own ramps and stuff. It was an amazing time, and there was ramps in the offices, and it was just fun. It was really, really fun, but very high octane, and I liked it. And so then I moved into other action sports. Like I worked in kind of like skate, surf, snow stuff, and it was always environments where it was super, super busy, not much downtime, lots of alcohol, lots of free bars, lots of parties, it was fun. It was fun. I loved it. Travel. I realised, I think, that I just didn't like being with myself. So if I was busy and working and doing stuff, and I never had to be quiet and by myself.
I was just thinking as you were talking about sort of the busy life and listening to you sort of as a teenager, and maybe at that early age as well, suffering with ADHD. I say suffering in the sense of not being able to kind of compute it and deal with it. It's not something that anyone suffers with. It's manageable. But it sounds like that work environment, although you thrived in it, it kind of brought out and amplified that part of you and almost like overexposed you in a way, and your personality. And it's funny, isn't it? Because we can all be in environments that overexpose a personality trait too much, where we've overdone it, but without really realizing it, because we're having fun, because we feel like we're just kind of in our flow, and it kind of speaks to us. So it's interesting to hear you kind of say that you've really had to kind of look at yourself, I guess, at that point. Was that the first time you sort of stood still and thought, what am I doing?
No, it was literally when I had my breakdown. So in 2014, I was working at a company, a snowboarding company, a media company, and I worked across 17 different titles. So there was different magazines and websites that were all based in primarily like snowboarding, bit of ski, bit of surf, bit of like mountain biking, BMX. And I had no idea that I was unwell. And it was, I think, my friends that noticed before I noticed. And I remember a very good friend of mine, we're still very good friends, and she was like my work wife, if you like, you know, we'd sit next to each other. And one day I said something like, I can't remember the exact sentence, but it was something like, oh, you know, like when you cross the road, every time you cross the road, you think, I wish I'd get hit by a car. And she just looked at me like, what? And I was like, yeah, right. But I thought it was really normal. And I was like, not to like die, but just to like be hospitalized or something, just to have like a break from life. And I just remember her face. She was kind of like, right. And I was like, oh. And so I think that made me then be like, oh, because I guess in a way, like when you're masking all the time and you've been masking for years, you don't even know that you're masking either. So I just thought everyone has those thoughts all the time. No one talks about it because it's a bit weird. And then when you actually find someone you really trust and you just sort of have a casual, what you deem a casual conversation, and they're like, are you okay? You know, that's not normal. She was very, I can't remember what she said now, but I remember her being very sort of like cautious about her words and very compassionate. And then I just couldn't stop crying, and I would just be crying all the time. And again, I just kept having excuses for everything. I'm really tired. We've been working towards this deadline. We were doing a launch. There was always seemed to be something whereby there was a reason why I felt the way that I felt, which was just generally consistently shit, for want of a better description. But I just thought, I'm tired. I just need to get to this date and I'll be able to have a holiday. And it's all these things that now partly I teach, especially when I'm teaching about burnout, because that was exactly what was happening. And I had no idea, because there was a study done, and they said the lies we tell ourselves. And there was these really common lies that people told themselves, which were things like, it's not me, it's everybody else that's causing me to feel stressed. I just need a holiday. If I can just get to XYZ date, whatever date that might be, like I just need to get to the end of the week, or I just need to finish this launch, or I just need to, then I'll be able to rest, and then I'll be okay. I'm just not sleeping very well at the moment. It will fix itself. Or I've not been eating particularly well, or maybe there was other things happening in life. My personal relationship was on the rocks at that point as well. So I thought, well, of course I'm going to be starting to feel a bit sad. Like, I don't know if we're going to break up. I don't know, what's going to happen. And then, one day I was at work, and as far as I remember, I'm trying to think exactly now, but I left the office and I remember ringing my mum, and I couldn't go back into the office because I couldn't stop crying. And I was just sat on this bench in Spitalfields, and I couldn't stop crying. And she was like, just go home, get some rest, like, how mums are. She said, I'm so lucky with my parents. You're probably just a bit tired, love. You've been overdoing it. You're right. And I went home and I cried for 3 days, and I didn't stop crying. I would be crying, and then I would fall asleep, and I'd wake up and I'd start crying. And that happened for 3 days. And I was ringing in work just saying, I'm unwell. But I sort of made out that I had the flu, I think, or something like that. And that's when I started getting really scared, because I thought, this isn't a hangover. This isn't, there wasn't really an explanation as to why I couldn't stop crying. And so, then I was just phoned my mum again and was a bit hysterical, and was like, I had some friends that had some pretty severe mental health issues, and one of them had been sectioned, and I was really scared that was what was going to happen to me, because I was having all these really unhelpful thoughts as well, suicidal thoughts. Like, it was just very, very dark. It was a very, very dark time. And I
were you taking any prescription drugs at that time at all as well?
No, nothing.
You on no antidepressants?
I had no idea there was anything wrong. I literally just thought, I don't think I even paid a thought to it. It's what I know now about living in a complete unaware, complete oblivious to anything that was happening.
So many people can relate to, right? It happens to so many of us and around the world.
Anyone had asked me, even 2 weeks before I had my breakdown, which was very severe, I would have said I was living my best life. I was living in London. I was out all the time. I was working with some incredible brands. I was, going to all these parties where there was like well-known people in our industry, and like, you feel like you're sort of rubbing shoulders with the people that matter, and you're going to all these do's, and I was snowboarding abroad, with my work and going.
So you can't possibly be depressed, right? You haven't.
What have I got to be depressed
You have no
about?
reason, Rachel, to be depressed. So
right, and
that's the question. That's the big thing, isn't it?
But then that's also the narrative, and then that's where you start to internalize it all because you feel bad. What have I got to be depressed about? I'm healthy, or obviously I wasn't very mentally healthy at that point, but I thought I was. I'm healthy. I was going to Bikram yoga, when that was like a thing and it was fashionable, and I was like, I'm making all right money for my age. I've got this lovely flat and I live with a couple of my mates who are amazing. We're having so much fun. I'm going to festivals and parties and going on holiday and like snowboarding, it's all very exciting, like on the front of it. If you looked at my Instagram or whatever, it would have looked like I was living my best life. And genuinely, I thought I was. I'm not, it wasn't like, I don't think looking back now, I can be like, wow, actually my brain was really dark, like there was things that I would do that I just thought were normal, which I now know aren't normal. Like, if I was crossing a road, I wouldn't stand right on the edge because I wouldn't quite trust myself not to jump in front of a car. If I was waiting for a tube, I would always have my hand on the wall, because if I was by the train edge, my brain would always be like, jump in front of the train. And I'd be like, no, I don't want to.
Wow.
And so, now to be intrusive thought, and I still get them occasionally, like I do still get intrusive thoughts. I haven't really shared this actually, exclusive. But I do still get intrusive
well, thank you, Rachel.
Some of my intrusive thoughts are really violent, but now I just don't pay them any attention. I don't really care. So it'll be like, stab yourself in the neck, or jump in front of that train, or you should shut yourself off a building, or, that happens not as frequent as it used to, but probably still a few times a month. Even now that I've done all this work on myself. So I think there is probably something in me that's just a part of me, and that's cool. Now I just call it Freddie. It's got a name. It's embodied. I think of it as like Freddy Krueger. Yeah, just think of it as like Freddy Krueger. He's like trying to kill me. Like the horror movie.
I know. So that's really interesting, isn't it? How these dark thoughts and how you've coped so far, and you're getting to that point where, you can't cope and something's got to change, I guess. And you're feeling like, do I need to be sectioned? If you're even having those thoughts, it's escalating in your mind already. And at that point, like, how did you ask for help? Because, you are having dark thoughts, and not to act on those thank gosh you haven't, right? And there's lots of people that don't get past that point. So
no.
How did you kind of push yourself through that? And what was the kind of
I didn't really. I basically phoned my mum, and I was, really worried, and I just was begging her, please don't section me, please don't section me. And she was like, why don't I just come round for a cup of tea? I remember distinctly, because she lives about 70 miles away. So it's not like she was just going to pop round
next door.
Yeah, it was like, a couple of hours drive, basically.
There really isn't anything that a cup of tea can't solve, even you're in extreme mental turmoil. I love the fact that your mum brought you a cup of tea. It's so British. Our American listeners are going to love that. Yeah.
So British.
If in doubt, bring out a cup of tea.
If in doubt, get the fucking teapot out. She just basically said, why don't I just pop round for a cup of tea? And I said, because she said, look, let me come and pick you up. Why don't you come home? And I said, no, like, I'm fine. And I kept saying, that was another lie that people tell themselves. I'm fine. And that was on repeat. I'm fine. There's nothing wrong with me. I'm okay. I'm fine. I can cope. I just need some sleep. It was those kinds of narratives that I had at that time. But mum, bless her, did drive all that way. And as soon as she got there, she just looked at me and was like, you're coming home with me. Like, you're not staying here. Let's go. And so I was very, very, very lucky, because her and dad basically picked me up. And that was me then for, I think I stayed there 3 or 4 months in my childhood bedroom. And I was ill, very, very ill. I didn't know what day it was. I couldn't tell the difference between, like, I remember sitting there one day and thinking, like, if somebody told me, like, the grass is blue and the sky is green, I wouldn't know whether that wasn't true or not. Like, it's
wow.
a
So
really
when you
weird...
look back on that moment, do you know, is there a name for that? Sort of, is it like some type of psychosis that you ended up
imagine it must be
experiencing?
I imagine it must be some kind of psychosis, because I literally didn't know anything. It was really terrifying. It's actually really, losing your mind is really terrifying, because all the things that tend to make you feel safe are things that we all universally agree on, right? Like the flavour of a cheese and onion crisp, or the fact that the sky is blue, you know, the fact that you can swim in the sea, the fact that, I don't know, there's certain things that we all just go, that's reality. And we all sort of agree that, you know, there might be things that we disagree on in terms of like politics or, you know, culture or different things. Do you like this piece of artwork? Yes or no? But we can agree that it's a piece of artwork.
It's of art, exactly.
When you lose your mind, it's like, is it art? I don't know. Or is that a table? Not sure. Is that green or blue? Don't know. I literally didn't know anything. So that was basically me for like a few months. I didn't even get out of bed to brush my teeth. Like, I was fully depressed, highly medicated at that point. I think I was on 3 or 4 different types of medication. It's all a bit hazy, that whole thing, to be honest, because it was, you're not really there.
Were you on antidepressants at that time?
Yeah, I obviously went to the doctors, because, I mean, I think my poor parents, I don't think they really knew what to do with me, because I was really like, I was not okay. And I was very, very lucky, because some people don't have that, you know, and I've always thought I'm so lucky with lots of things that were environmental and situational. I've been very, very lucky, because now, since COVID, the wait lists for help and stuff are massive. I was able to see a doctor pretty quickly. They prescribed me medication straight away. My parents literally looked after me. They cooked for me. I had a bed to stay in, because I was still getting paid from work, because I was on paid sick leave because of the contract that I had at work. My rent was paid, because I wasn't doing anything. Like, I wasn't going out. I was literally just laying in bed 24 hours a day, and sometimes brushing my teeth from a cup. You know, it was like, I wasn't spending any money. I was living with my parents, you know, so my rent was paid. I didn't need to worry about that, even though I wasn't living there. Like, you know, I often think if that had happened and I didn't have any parents, or I didn't have the loving, kind parents that I had, or parents that were in a position that had a spare bedroom in their house to be able to go, come to the spare room, we'll look after you. You know, I do feel exceptionally lucky that I had that, because lots of people don't. And I don't think I would have got better as quick if I didn't have that.
It's amazing to hear that you're so grateful for those parts, because I think often they can be overlooked, and we still think we've got nothing, when actually we are really lucky to, you know, to have some kind of support, even if it, you know, it's your immediate parents, or even if it was your friend stepping in. You know, it can often go overlooked, and you can start to feel even more lonely, I guess, through this experience. So it's so nice to hear how grateful you are.
Even when you've got people around you, I think you can feel very lonely. I felt very lonely for a long time. But I think loneliness is an interesting one for me, because I think primarily, and people may disagree with me with this, but primarily I think loneliness is created by a disconnection to self. I don't think loneliness has as much to do with other people as people think, because if it did, people that were married or had kids or had pets, or, you know, were part of their church, they wouldn't feel lonely, but they do still. And I think that's the missing puzzle piece of loneliness, is connection to self. And I think partly my breakdown was created because, in order to survive all of this stuff that was happening inside my head and my body that I didn't understand, I had created all these external coping mechanisms to try and present that I was really happy and energetic and fun to be around, and, you know, all these things, which I am to a certain extent. You know, now I try not to mask, as sometimes it's automatic and I can't help it, but I try not to now. I try to be much more honest about how I'm feeling, because I think that's helpful. And 90% of the time now I am happy-go-lucky, relaxed, whatever, and it's great. But there are times when I do feel like low again or whatever, and it's like realizing that's just part of you and that's okay. Not making it mean something, not making it mean that there's something wrong with you, you're broken, you need fixing, like just getting rid of those narratives and being like, okay, I'm sad. That's okay.
Did you feel a sense of disconnection from yourself for those former years?
Absolutely. Yeah, 100%. I don't think I really knew who I was, because when you're masking, essentially what you're doing is, or my understanding of it anyway, what I was doing, which I probably shouldn't speak for other people, you're essentially thinking to yourself, or I would think to myself, who do I need to be for this person to like me? And then I would create that persona so that person liked me. So I would have these variety of different personas that I would step into. And you do all of this subconsciously. It's actually quite amazing, really. And I would step into these different personas. And I remember, like, one of my friends said to me, because I've never really liked celebrating my birthday. I'm getting better as I'm getting older, and she was wondering why I didn't like celebrating my birthday. And I never really admitted it to anyone, but it was my fear that I would have all these different people in the same room, and there would be no way on earth I could be all the different versions of myself that I needed to be, because everybody was in the same room.
Wow.
And that would be impossible for me to then deliver the version of me that they needed, because imagine there's two of my mates having a conversation and I need to be two different versions of myself at the same time for those two different people, but I can't, because I'm there in front of both of them. So who do I be then? So you end up in this chronic people pleasing, and it's exhausting.
Yeah, I mean, it does. It sounds exhausting, and I can really understand sort of where you're coming at in terms of being that sort of chameleon and figuring out what type of personality you turn on and off according to who you're with. But it sounds like it went a lot deeper for you than that, and you really embodied these different characters, like, your analogy of being in the room and not knowing where to turn actually made you kind of sink to your knees, rather than be like, oh, well, I know how to handle this because they're all my friends and they all love me for me, not because I'm these different people. So
yeah, they didn't all know me. They all knew a different version of me, the version that I thought they would like the best. So then you don't, and that's where the disconnection comes from, because who the hell am I? And that's why you don't want to be on your own, because when you're on your own, just all the dark thoughts come in and all the heaviness comes in, and there's nobody to bounce off. All the time you've got somebody to bounce off and pretend to be something that you're not. It's a distraction. And then when that's not there, it's just this bare version of self, and you don't know who that is. It's very confusing. And
so how did you crack the nut? How did you get yourself out of this hole and connect with yourself again? And by this stage, sound like you're pretty far from connecting to yourself. You're dosed up on drugs.
I was,
at home, in
bed at my parents.
Exactly. But in bed, in the middle of a thriving career. So how did you start to make some changes, and what were they?
All I wanted to do was get back to my old self. That's all I kept thinking about. That was my primary concern. I just want to be back at work. I want to be back going out with my friends every weekend. I was 32 and I was in my bedroom at home at my parents'. I was like, what the hell is wrong with you? And I was very, very hard on myself, actually. And exactly like you say, I've been very lucky in my career. I'd actually been headhunted for my last 3 roles, and I was moving up. And the role that I had at that time was quite a coveted role at, the best snowboarding magazine that existed at that time. So it was, I felt very lucky, and I just wanted to get back to that. What I didn't realise was getting back to that was what was making me sick. So I started just Googling, as you do, Dr. Google, right, okay, now I've got this diagnosis of depression and anxiety. That's what I was diagnosed with. So I had severe depression and generalised anxiety disorder is what they sort of put on my stuff, I think. I thought, right, okay, let me just start Googling it then, because I can't be the only person that's ever had this, and there must be similarities. If I can find similarities in people that have healed themselves, then I can heal myself too. And I didn't realize that that's kind of what I was doing at the time, but I just thought, I cannot live like this. I can't get out of bed. Like, I can't function. I'm having so many thoughts that before I've even realized what that thought is, there's another thought there. And like, my brain was like, how I tried to explain it was, for the younger listeners who probably won't know what this is, in the 80s, there used to be these things that people would have on their desk called a Rolodex. And it was like a circular thing that had phone numbers in it. So it would be the equivalent of your mobile phone holding all these different phone numbers. And you could flick through it and it would kind of go like that. And then it would stop on D or whatever. And you'd be able to then find, you know, I don't know, whatever the name was, Dixon or whatever, and you could pull out the number. And I just remember saying to people, that's what my brain was like. It was like that for months. It was just like this constant, like, just thoughts, more thoughts, like more thoughts, all the thoughts. And I was having all these insane ideas and I just couldn't capture anything to make sense of it. And on top of that, so you've got this very high energy brain that's just like, and then your body is just like, won't do anything. So you'll be in bed and you'll be going, get up, let's get up, we need to get out of bed. And your body's just like, won't move. And your brain's like, stand up, like, let's get out of bed. And I remember for quite a long period of time, I would force myself. My parents would be downstairs and I would literally be laying in bed being like, get up, get up, get up. And it would last for like 2 hours. I would just be going, get up. And I'd be getting so angry and my body wouldn't move. And so for about a week or so, I think it was, or a few days, I don't know, it felt like forever. I would literally force myself out of the bed. So
wow,
luckily it wasn't a very high bed. I would force myself out of the bed and I would roll out of the bed onto the floor and then I'd be laying on the floor and I'd be like, kneel up, kneel up, kneel up, kneel up. And then I'd force myself to like kneel up. And then I'd be like, stand up, stand up, stand up, stand up. And this whole process would take, I don't know, like 3 hours. And then I'd be stood up and I'd be like, okay, now we're going to go down the stairs. Do you know what I mean? And then it'd be like, okay, now you've got to get down the stairs. And then you'd get downstairs. Now I remember like high-fiving my mum one day because it was about 3 p.m. and I'd managed to get up and get down the stairs and it was 3 o'clock and I was so happy that I'd managed to just get down the stairs, you know. And then I would just sit on the couch for the rest of the day. But I didn't care because I was downstairs. I wasn't in bed, you know. And so it kind of started there. And it was really hard. It was really, really hard. And then I found people like Louise Hay was the first person that I found, who's obviously like I don't know if people have heard of her, but she's very famous in the self-development world. And she had written this book called You Can Heal Your Life. And it was all about affirmations and how what you thought created your reality. And I'd never heard that before, that was a thing or could be a thing. And so I found on YouTube, just by accident, this documentary that was like Louise Hay documentary about the book You Can Heal Your Life. And the opening scene, for anyone who might have seen it, is this woman walking along the street and she's in a suit and stuff and she looks really smart. She's obviously in some kind of city. And her brain's just going, you're late. You always do this. What the hell's wrong with you? You know, why can't you just be on time? Why don't you give yourself more time in the morning? You've messed up that thing yesterday. And, you know, what are you going to do for dinner tonight? I can't believe you've not done a shop again this week. Like, and she's just basically just really giving herself a hard time. And then there's other people walking towards her and they all seem like they're all happy. And she's like, oh, there they are, those fucking happy people, you know, like just smiling, this, you know. And I was like, I think this movie's about me, you know, like that's exactly what happens to me. And then through this documentary, they basically share these, you know, these theories around if you start saying kinder things to yourself, your life will, you know, by osmosis kind of get better. And at that time I wasn't doing anything. So I thought, well, there's no harm in trying. Like, what's the worst thing that can happen? So I got out a pen and paper and I started writing down some of the things that I was thinking about myself that weren't very kind. So I would write down things like, you're fat, you're stupid, you're an idiot, nobody likes you, you know, you deserve this. What have you got to be depressed about? You know, all these kinds of like really negative things that I thought about myself. You're unlovable.
Yeah.
all these things. And then what I did on the opposite side of the paper was I was like, okay, well, if I didn't want this to be true, so, I'm fat was like a massive one for me. Anyone who grew up in the 90s that wasn't like a size 2 in American terms, or whatever was probably felt the same way. And so I thought, okay, well, if I don't want I am fat to be what I tell myself, what am I going to tell myself instead? And so on the opposite side of the page, I just started what I now call flipping these things. So, what if I could love my body just the way it is? And then I'm stupid, could become, I know that I'm intelligent. I'm unlovable could become, I'm learning to love myself, and I allow other people to love me too.
Did you believe those things when you were writing them?
No, I didn't. And then she has this practice where you have to stand in front of the mirror and tell yourself that you love yourself. And I couldn't do it. And I used to cry. I used to stand there and try and say it. And I couldn't. Oh, it's making me emotional thinking about it. But I couldn't say it to myself. You just think that's so sad. That's so sad that you'd feel that way about yourself. Like now I'm just like, oh, so much compassion for that part of myself, because that's just such a sad way to live. Do you know what I mean? That's just such an exhausting, sad way to live. And so I just started practicing, and that's where I started. And I didn't believe it, and I would argue with myself. And this is the thing, lots of people say to me, like, how did you get well? And when I tell them, I don't think they like the answer, because it's hard. It's really, really hard work. That's how I got well. I had to force myself out of bed every day. I had to crawl on my hands and knees to be able to stand up. Like, that's how I got well, because I started allowing that bit of myself that wanted to live to fight, and not allow the bit that wanted me to die to win. And that was like an actual war. It was like an internal war of this bit of me that was like, just kill yourself. It's easier. Like, do you want to live like this? You're only 32. Like, you might have another 60 years of this. Do you want to do that? The answer was no, I didn't. But then there was this other little part of me that was really quiet, that was just like, everything's going to be okay. Like, well, you just need to, this is just a hump. Don't worry about it, And I just started trying to listen to that bit that was like trying to, it makes you sound a bit crazy saying about parts work. But what I now understand is, from doing all my training and stuff like that, you have all these different parts of self, and it's like these fragmented parts that are maybe stuck in shame or trauma or different things. And when you can heal those parts, then send compassion to them, send love to them, maybe even forgive parts if that's necessary, suddenly these parts can get louder. And so I just started practicing every day, around about, I don't know, anywhere between 4,000 and 10,000 times a day. I'd be repeating these affirmations every single day, because I read about neuro pathways.
That's huge.
Yeah, but I've read about neuro pathways, right? So if you want to create a new neuro pathway, how do you do that? It's 10,000 hours. That's why people that are an expert in something, they say, well, it's 10,000 hours. Well, that's because, similarly.
There's a great book on that, isn't there? The 10,000 hour rule. But yeah, it's called the 10,000 hour rule.
I didn't, yeah.
I want to say it's written by somebody called Malcolm, but I could be wrong. I'd have to sense check that, and we can write it in the notes. But yeah, it's a 10,000 hour rule, which is why when we get older, learning a new skill, taking on a new job becomes even more daunting, because we don't really have the time necessarily to hone the skill and to get better. And
there's parts of the brain that also become less plastic. So in your brain, you've basically got different areas and different spaces of the brain that have different functions. And some of those are very plastic, i.e. when we talk about plasticity in the brain, we're essentially saying programmable, for want of a better description, right? It makes it easier to understand. The subconscious and unconscious mind is programmed between the ages of 0 and 7. Between 7 and 12, you start to program another part of the brain called the neolimbic. And the neolimbic part of the brain is where imposter syndrome lives, right? Because that basically plots you on a graph of assertive and submissive, trusting and untrusting. And we're all plotted on there somewhere, because when we lived in villages, not everyone could be a village elder with very high assertiveness, very untrusting or very trusting, right? Depending on what kind of village elder they were going to be. You need people that are plotted all over the graph so that you can have a healthy, balanced village, because some people need to be more assertive, and they're the people that make the rules and tell people what to do. And then you've got the more submissive people who go, okay, great idea, I'll just get on that for you, right? And that's kind of how the world works. However, if like me, you experienced bullying or had quite adverse childhood experiences between the ages of 7 and 12, that part of your brain is going to think that you are low level. And then when you get your job as CEO, some 30 years later, your brain goes, you don't belong here. You're not the village boss. You're the little jester, the village jester down here. You're not up here. And that part of the brain takes about 3 to 6 months to program with regular programming. So, and to make a new neural pathway in the brain, again, takes repetition. So if you look at how many thoughts the average person has on a day, it's quite difficult to estimate, but there's guesses anywhere between 12 and 80,000 thoughts a day. So let's average it at 60,000. Right? To create a new neuro pathway, you've got to outweigh those 60,000 thoughts that you're having. And the estimates are, we have these things called ANTs, which are automatic negative thoughts. And automatic negative thoughts happen to keep you safe, right? Because if I'm worrying about, oh my God, well, what if that happens? What if I lose my job? What if they don't like me? What if? I've got a plan ready to go just in case that bad thing happens. Brilliant brain, right? Very, very good survival mechanism. However, 99.99999% of the time, those bad things are never going to happen. So you're just wasting these, right? 85% of your thoughts are automatic negative thoughts. So if you're having 60,000 thoughts a day, 85% of them are negative. In order to offset that, to imprint this new neuro pathway, you've got to do 10,000 practices a day, 15, 20,000 practices a day. I just used to sit there and just repeat to myself, I love myself. And then my brain would go, no, you don't. I go, yes, I do. No, you don't. Yes, I do. No, I don't. Yes, I do. I love myself. I respect myself. I'm healing every day. I'm getting better every day. I release the need to feel ill. I release this illness. I'm safe. My body is safe. I would just repeat all day. I'd just be in bed, repeat all day. I had this list. And then when some of them started to embed, I would rewrite new ones. And rewrite new ones. And then I would just practice. It took me about maybe 3 or 4 years to reprogram pretty much my whole brain of doing that every single day.
That's absolutely incredible, Rachael. Challenging your neuro pathways to learn new behaviors and patterns. And that's something that we talk about a lot on the podcast. I know as a coach, it's something that, you would cover a huge amount in your sessions, because that's a lot of what needs breaking in all of us at times. And it's so subconscious, you don't realize you have the pattern and behavior. So the first thing, we don't want to be getting ourselves into that extreme place of being in bed with crippling anxiety and depression. But there's so many of us living underneath that line, so to speak, who are just kind of just getting by and not really thinking there's much wrong, but then maybe going along moaning that there is nothing right in their life at the same time.
It's so unnecessary. And this is the thing. It's like, that's part of my work, is like, it's unnecessary. You don't need to suffer.
Well, you need to put in the work. You need to do the work is really what I'm hearing from you. And you are a shining light of somebody who's done the work.
It's tricky because also we're, another part of the brain is programmed specifically to save energy, conserve energy. And this is where people find habits so difficult. And this is where the club, the Happy Habits Club, actually used to be called Clear Club, because I thought, the work is really about clarity. It's about awareness. It's about getting clear on, clearing your mind, clearing your energy field, getting clear on what you want out of life, how you're going to go and get it. And then, executing the plan. But as I moved on through my work and, learning, because I'm basically obsessed with this stuff. I'm really boring. All I do is read about trauma, neuroscience and healing and stuff. I'm just obsessed with it now.
No, not at all. We love the fact that you're obsessed with it. It's music to our ears. We're all learning on this podcast.
Right. And but then it's like, I realized it's not really about the clarity and the awareness, because you can have that and nothing changes. It's the habits. It's you are what you consistently do. You are what you consistently think. You are what you consistently eat, what you consistently consume in terms of media. It's everything, it's everything. And actually, if you can start changing these little habits of thinking, if you can start releasing one of the things that I love to teach about is around emotions, right? And we're all programmed that emotions are good or bad, right? We could probably all sit here, and if I asked you to make a list of good emotions, you might list things like joy, nice surprises, happiness, excitement, pleasure, passion, these kind of these kind of feelings that we have, these emotions that we have. And then if I was to ask you to list some bad emotions, you might start listing things like grief, sadness, anger, rage, anxiety would probably come under that, apathy, these envy, jealousy, bitterness, right? The problem with that is that means if you feel that way, you're also good or bad. And we're often programmed like that from childhood, because when our parents aren't taught about emotional regulation, they will do things, and often, completely blindly. And this is nothing against any parent. I'm really cautious about, or I try to be very cautious about how I share this, because being a parent is almost an impossible task, and it's very, very hard and exhausting and everything else. So this is no judgment on any parent anywhere. You are all amazing and great people that are bringing up human beings. It's a hard job, right? But generally, they're also not trained in emotional regulation or what emotions are. And so when their toddler has this, what seems like hissy fit over something that's completely irrelevant to them, they're told to go and sit on their own and think about what they did. Go and sit on the naughty step, or you might get hit even, not even hit like abuse hit, but spanked or whatever, and told to just stop doing what you're doing, right? Now, as a child, you don't have the brainwaves for critical thinking or logical thinking yet until you're 7. So up to the age of 7, you literally couldn't go and sit and think about what you've done anyway, because you don't have the ability to do that. So what you do is you internalize it and go, I'm bad. I did something bad and that makes me unlovable. And if mummy and daddy or primary caregiver, whoever that might be, doesn't love me, I will die. Because if they don't love me, they won't feed me, they won't clothe me, they won't house me. And I am acutely aware, even as a baby, that I cannot do those things for myself. So I'm acutely aware of like how cute I need to be, how nice I need to be, because when I'm not nice, I'm bad. And if I'm bad, I'm unlovable, and unlovable means that I will die because they won't look after me. And that's where a lot of these people-pleasing behaviours come from, where we start to internalise shame, embarrassment, rage, anger. We've not been modelled a healthy expression of anger. And actually, if you can look at emotions as they're not good or bad, they don't make you good or bad, they're a compass.
Yeah.
That's it. When I feel sad, I've lost something.
Rachel, I love that.
That's sadness in a nutshell. I've lost something, right? It could be a relationship breakup. It could be somebody died. It could be your car got nicked, right? You've lost something that mattered to you is gone. And now I feel sad. If you're in anger, all that is telling you, somebody crossed my boundary. That's it. I'm angry. You crossed my boundary, or you're in my way. That's it. That's anger in a nutshell. Envy in a nutshell. I want that thing that you have got and I don't have. And I don't want to admit it to myself. And that's jealousy and envy in a nutshell. Happiness. You like this thing. Pleasure. You really, really, really like this thing. Anxiety. I'm scared of something. Something's making me feel unsafe. So when you can start to actually realise, okay, then you can unpick it a little bit. It's much easier. Why do I feel, for me with depression and anxiety, when it even got to that point, I could have unpicked that. Well, what am I scared of? I'm scared that if people find out who I really am, because I'm masking all the time, they won't like me. And that makes me feel unsafe. And that's why I feel anxious. Sadness. I'm lost. I don't know who I am. I don't know where I'm meant to be in the world. I've lost my connection to self. I've lost my connection to community. I never felt like I fitted in the snowboarding community because I'd never been and done a season, all that kind of stuff, you know. It's like, oh, actually, if I could have unpicked that in that moment and gone, I'm working too hard, so I'm exhausted physically.
Yeah.
Mentally, I'm not being very nice to myself in my head. Emotionally, I've got all these emotions that I don't know what to do with, that I haven't processed, that are building up in my body like a pressure cooker. And spiritually, I'm bereft. I've got no spiritual practice whatsoever. If I could have fixed some of those things, I'm almost guarantee I wouldn't have had a breakdown. But I didn't know.
But you didn't know. That's the thing. And the beauty in what you found out through your journey is that it's now turned into your career.
Yeah.
And you are now helping others through applying everything that you've learned, and that you're obviously continuing to learn. I mean, you're wildly knowledgeable in these areas, and it's incredible to listen to you sort of dissect the human, as, you know, especially within our emotions, and to pay lip service to all of those different emotions, which really guide our days so often, and it can really determine whether we have a good day or a bad day.
And to realise that you can just process them. That you can just process them. So anger, when you're angry, anger is a very high energy emotion, right? It wants to move. Anger does not want to be still. Think of anyone that you see that's angry. Where does anger live? Anger moves up through the body like a wave. You can feel it. Lots of people with repressed anger will have problems with their knees and their hips because they will try and lock it off at the joint before it gets up through the body because they don't want to feel it. But if you can actually allow that anger to come up, and you can literally put a pile of, this is what I do, my poor neighbours, they must think I'm like nuts. Pile up a bunch of cushions, something soft, you know, and you just beat the crap out of the cushions and scream. It lasts about 30 seconds and then you go, whew, and it's gone. You feel better.
You feel better. So it's about, for you, and what I'm learning is to face the emotions head on, to sit within the emotion that you're feeling at that time, rather than suppress it or fight against it or allow your mind to tell you it's bad.
And that's half the battle, because it's hard, right? And that's why a lot of people can't meditate, because meditation's not difficult, right? Let's face it, right? Sit down, shut up, breathe. Easy. Not easy. Not...
Rachel, you put it so eloquently. That is exactly how we should be teaching meditation going forward. I have this conversation a lot with people about meditation because it is, interestingly, I think everybody I've ever interviewed brings it up, and yet majority of people I speak to on a daily basis don't do it. Just the general public. I'm talking about people I meet and speak to who aren't on the podcast, and it's usually because they don't see the point, and they're not the type of person who would sit still, and their brain is a high performance brain, and they're busy in some cases, and it's not for them. And I can feel myself wanting to scream at those types of people, saying, "That's exactly, you're the sort of person that really should be harnessing that."
Well, it's one of my favorite sayings, what is it? If you're, you should meditate for 20 minutes a day unless you're busy, then you should meditate for an hour.
Yeah.
I mean, meditation's a funny thing because I am a qualified meditation teacher, and I think it has changed my life. And at the beginning of my healing process, I used meditation a lot, and I used to meditate for 3 hours a day, every day for about 6 months in silence. I got really into it and it helped me a lot. However, there's times when you shouldn't meditate and no one talks about that. If you've experienced trauma and while you're meditating, you have flashbacks, you should not meditate. Nobody talks about that. You should meditate in safety. Meditation's always going to be there. And there's different styles of meditation. And this is the other thing, sit down, shut up, breathe is the basic premise of it, right? And that is basically it, right? And for a lot of people, they can't do that because they don't like themselves. So when you actually think about your inner self as a person, I often get my clients to kind of personify different parts of themselves, right? So I've got Freddie, Freddy Krueger, he tries to kill me. That's my intrusive thoughts or whatever, might as well kill yourself, Rach. What's the point of being alive? All right, Freddy, having a hard day, and I'll just it sounds crazy to say it, but I'll just literally.
Oh, I love that. No, I think it's brilliant. I think that facing it head on, which is clearly what you're teaching as well. You are teaching very much to take control of your life and of your emotions and everything that's coming up. And by giving it a name, you've almost loosened the power that it has over you by doing that, I'd say.
And a character. He's part of me. So often I'll say to my clients, because generally I do work with people who've experienced quite extreme trauma as well. So, generally when we've been traumatized, and I know I've had some trauma I don't really speak about publicly, but it changes you. It changes everything about you physically. It changes your brain makeup. It changes how your nervous system reacts and responds to things. It changes lots of things. And so if you're trying to sit in meditation and you're trying to sit down, shut up and breathe, and that part of you that you haven't been able to name yet or recognize yet starts going, hey, remember this? Wasn't that horrible? Let me play it to you like a movie for ages or whatever. Do you want to sit with that for like 20 minutes? No, of course you don't. That's terrifying and horrible and painful. So what a human being is programmed to do, avoid pain. So then you're being told, sit down, shut up, breathe. And when you sit down, shut up, breathe, it's painful. So your body, everything about you is going, stand up, move around, don't breathe. Just don't, whatever you will do, put Netflix on, grab some ice cream, distract, go shopping, gamble, go and have sex with loads of crazy people that you don't know why you're having sex with them. Go to all these parties, drink loads of alcohol, do whatever you want, but don't sit there with yourself. That's terrifying, horrible. But then when you can actually say to people like, okay, cool, well, you can't meditate. That's not true. Meditation is a skill. People think they should just be able to meditate because we can all breathe, we can all sit down, and within reason, I find it's very difficult, but you can shut up if you really try, right? But when you're taught, actually, it's a skill, right? So if you were going to run a marathon, because I know like you used to be into running quite a lot, right?
Yeah.
Let's say you've never run yet, you've never run at all, and you come to me and you say, Rach, I want to run a marathon. And I go, okay, let's do it. And you go, okay. And I go, now. You go, what? And I'm like, we can run now a marathon, or you're never going to run one ever. So what do you want to do? Do you want to run now? Is it 26 miles for a marathon?
Yeah, about that.
Right. 26 miles or nothing. What do you want to do? And you're like, I don't know if I can run 26 miles. I never ran before. And I go, well, are you going to give it a go or not? Because if you're not, you're just wasting my time. So can you hurry up? Do you want to do it or not? And you're going to go, I don't know, it's a bit scary, it's a bit daunting, try and run 26 miles I never ran before. Might try, right? But probably around, depending how your fitness level, me, 10 minutes in, fitter, 5 miles in.
I'd probably be 8 minutes in.
Right. Or even if you're really fit, 5 miles in, 10 miles in, your body's going to hurt. You're going to potentially cry and give up and not want to ever run ever again. And that's what happens with meditation. So actually, if you can say to people it's a skill, the same as running. If you were going to learn to run, what would you do? You'd go and find a good pair of running shoes, number one, because you know if you've got decent running shoes, that's going to help you, right? So go and find yourself a decent meditation cushion or a space in your house that's comfortable to sit in for 20 minutes, right? But we don't. We just sit down and try and do it, right? We don't prepare. Then you might say, you know what, I'm going to get a mate, because I'm probably not going to train on my own. I won't be motivated enough to do it. I might get a friend and maybe we'll do some training runs together. So maybe twice a week, we might run for 20 minutes. But then within a year, that 20 minutes has gone 30 minutes, 40 minutes, an hour, 3 hours, 4 hours. And then, woohoo, I did the London Marathon, right? But that didn't happen overnight. You didn't just wake up and be a marathon runner. And no one's taught that about meditation. Meditation is a practice. It's a skill. And you can learn it just like anything else you can learn, like running, playing the piano. No one sits down and plays the piano like Chopin or Mozart. They learn the chords. They get it wrong. They have a day when they play really well, and then they have a day when they mess it all up and they feel like they've got fat fingers, not synchronized. That's meditation. So when you can start to learn about meditation in a different way, you can stop giving yourself a hard time when you can't do it. And also to realize that, you know, at the beginning, your practice is to go, focus on my breath. I'm going to meditate. And now I'm thinking about my shopping list. That's okay. Now I'm going to bring it back to the breath. Now I'm thinking about this email that I need to send for work. Now I'm going to bring it back to the breath. Now I'm thinking about my partner or my mum or my dad or whoever. Now I'm thinking about this. Now I'm thinking about that. God, I wish I'd stop thinking, God, I can't do this. I'm so bad at this. I knew I wouldn't be able to do it. Oh my God, this is the most frustrating thing. Why can't I do it? It's only just sit down, shut up and breathe. Why can't I just sit down, shut up and breathe? What the hell's wrong with me? Okay, hang on a sec. Okay, I've just got to breathe. That's it. Now I can just ignore, like, the brain's okay. The brain's just doing its thing. That's all it's doing. It's okay. Maybe I can be compassionate towards myself. Now I'm thinking about cheese. Now I'm thinking about what I'm going to have for dinner. Now I'm thinking about, okay, just bring it back to the breath. I'm getting distracted again. That's meditation. But you just watch people sitting there with their hands in a mudra, looking peaceful, but inside their brain's going back to the breath, off somewhere else, back to the breath. So just think about it like, there's an analogy that I always use when I'm teaching meditation. There used to be this advert on TV. So I don't know if people are listening to this where in the world, but there's a toilet paper company in the UK called Andrex. And there used to be an advert where there was this cute little puppy and it would chase this toilet roll, basically. And what I like to say to people is, think of your brain like the Andrex puppy, completely untrained. It's cute, right? The Andrex puppy was very cute for people that haven't seen this advert. And your thoughts are the loo rolls, right? Your thoughts are the loo rolls. So work, friends, whatever, wherever your brain's going to go, that's all your loo rolls. And your puppy is going to chase the loo roll because it's not trained and it thinks it's a fun game. And it's your job as the meditator to go, oi, bring that loo roll back over here. Right? And because it's a cute puppy and it doesn't know any different, it's just not trained, you're never going to like punch the puppy and be like, no, bad doggy, no. Like, you'd never do that to an actual puppy. Do you know what I mean? You'd be like, oh, you naughty little scamp, you. Right? And so actually it's like, then you can relax a bit. It doesn't matter if the mind's running off all over the place. That's what the mind does. It's trying to keep you safe. It's not defunct. It's not broken. Over time, as you practice, the loo rolls will get less. And the calling back will get less, and you'll find your way with it.
Oh, I love that analogy, Rachel.
If you really can't meditate, hum. Breathe in, hum out. Breathe in, hum out. It works for everybody.
Oh, really?
Because you don't need to think about anything. You just, and that's it. And it, because of the humming.
That is such a great tip.
Balances your nervous system. The humming stimulates your vagus nerve. The breath helps you balance. So everybody can meditate. It's just practice. And that first bit, not going to lie, especially as somebody undiagnosed, but I'm eat my hat if I haven't got ADHD, very difficult for me to sit down, shut up and breathe. But if I can do it, anyone can do it.
And what do you feel are the top benefits for you, especially say somebody who undiagnosed but ADHD tendencies and busy-brained, busy people who might not still feel that meditation is for them? What have you learned that from meditation that you really can't live without and keeps you going back for more?
It's going to sound really cheesy, but it's just peace. You know, like, honestly, it's no way to live when your brain is like that. When your head hits the pillow at night and you can't sleep properly because your brain's going a million ideas, da 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 da. Like, when you are constantly just being hard on yourself, when you've got no self-compassion, you know, there's no, like, I don't know, for me, there's less joy when there's less peace. And I want more joy in my life. So for me, even though the practice is sometimes difficult, I'm not here to say everybody should meditate, right? Do a moving meditation, like running could be a meditation. Just be present. Being able to be present with yourself is a real skill. And the other thing that comes for me is decisions become a lot easier to make. It's a lot easier to notice, like, when you're on track being authentically you, and when you're off track and you're not being authentically you. It's much easier to do that if you actually sit, And I used to have a much more disciplined meditation practice. And I think this is the other thing just to share with people that are listening, you don't have to have a morning routine. You don't have to have a bedtime routine. You can meditate for 5 minutes in the middle of the day, twice a week, whenever you feel like it. It still helps. If you can't do it every day for 20 minutes every morning, don't. It doesn't matter. Do it on a Monday morning, a Wednesday afternoon, a Thursday, at 2:00. It doesn't matter. You don't have to have.
It's so wonderful that you've said that, giving people permission in that way. We talk a lot about morning routines and evening bedtime routines, the whole routine situation. And for lots of people, it's just not possible.
No, I can't. I've tried.
And instead of just disregarding it, it's try and do it again at some, try, other points in the day. It's still fruitful.
Yeah. And it's about making it work for you. That's the key to all of this stuff, to all of self-development. And I often share about a garden analogy, right? It's like when I first arrived in my mind garden, when I had my breakdown, it was like no one had ever gardened it before. It was thick with weeds and, I had to get a machete out and cut through all the stuff and, bulldoze through things and then decide the layout and then plant all the seeds and then fertilize all the seeds and keep mowing the grass and keep on top of everything. And it was really, really hard work, But then there comes a point where, and I think this is another thing people don't talk about in self-development either, you've done the work. Invite your friends round and have a garden party. Like, you deserve it. Don't start looking in that back corner of the garden that you haven't touched yet, that was going to be the, dump pile or whatever, and just go, okay, all right, what's next then? What can I dig up now? And start trying to dig up the bones that have been buried in the garden. You know what? Have a break. You've built something beautiful. Enjoy it. Relax, But
have fun. Fun is so important.
But remember, if you don't touch that garden for a year, next summer when you want to go out there and have fun, there ain't going to be a nice garden to go and hang out in. It's going to be all overgrown. It's going to be, again, you're going to have to put in loads of work just to get it back to what it was. Whereas if over autumn and over the winter, you just do a little bit of weeding here and there. So that might be a little bit of meditation, might be going to therapy here and there, might be watching your nutrition, might be exercise, might be, it's just, you're just doing little bits of weeding, little bits of maintenance. And then next summer, everything will bloom again and it'll be all beautiful. It's like, if you don't do the maintenance and you don't do the weeding, it's all going to get overgrown again and you're going to be back to square one and it's hard.
It's a constant journey, isn't it? It's a lifestyle change is what it is. It's the self-development. Yeah. It's not turning it on or off. It's very much part and parcel of your lifestyle. And as always, it's about the balance. And we're here to get to that point. And a lot of us can live out of balance with ourselves.
Yes.
You've given people so many great tips. I wonder if there's been anything in your life, like a standout book or a standout film, TV program, anything that just resonated with you at the time that you've always remembered and hold true to you, and you thought, I just really needed that bit.
Definitely Louise Hay, You Can Change Your Life. That was a game changer for me, for sure. Then finding Brad Yates, he's an EFT practitioner. He's actually been on my podcast, and they say, don't meet your heroes. He's one of my heroes and he's amazing. Even though I met him, I was like, but his YouTube channel changed my life because that's where I started tapping.
Just explain just a little bit about EFT.
So EFT is basically what's known as the fourth wave of psychology. So it's an energy psychology practice, and you use the meridian lines in the body, acupressure points, and you tap on them. So you use essentially tapping, which is kinetic energy, to stimulate the acupuncture points on the body whilst you follow a format of speaking. And you can use it in lots of different ways. Like, I like using it to help people with, trauma and different things like that. But you can use it on physical pain. You can use it for lots of different things. It's very, very flexible. practice. So that again was a game changer. And then
Brilliant.
When I started learning about the nervous system and trauma, that was kind of the next game changer. And I did for myself EMDR therapy and TRE, which is a movement therapy for trauma. And I guess more recently, I don't know, Bruce Lipton's stuff was incredible. So Bruce Lipton does The Biology of Belief.
It's a great book.
Joe Dispenza's work. So many people, Brené Brown. And there's a guy, Johan Hari. His TED Talk blew my mind. I think he's the guy that was talking about Rat Park. And how, you know, rats, if they were given water with cocaine, laced with cocaine, they would only consistently drink it if there was nothing else to do. And they felt alone and like unloved and whatever. But if they created this like Rat Park, which meant they could hang out with their friends, they could play, they could have sex, they could do all the stuff that rats love to do. And they just kind of hit the coke when they felt like it, not in an addiction way. And that kind of blew my mind a bit. Well, the fact that actually you might think that there's addictions or behaviors or things that you can't change, but actually if you change your environment, you know, in terms of where you work, who you hang out with, how you think, your emotions, what you eat, like if you can change your environment, that can often change the behavior very easily. Often it's the environment that's...
I love that. I think it's very powerful, the environment, and it's something that can be overlooked.
Yeah, and again, another reason I love the club so much, because I'm super lucky, right? Not to show off, but I've got amazing friends and amazing family and people that I can talk openly about with my mental health, who don't judge me, who support me, people that I can ring and say, you know what, I'm really low at the moment, and they'll be like, right, cool, and they, you know what to do and how to help me. And lots of people don't have that. And so actually within the Happy Habits Club, what we're doing is building this beautiful community of women who can hop on and say, I feel shit, or this happened, or whatever, or I set a boundary today for the first time with my boss or whatever, and we will celebrate with them, you know, the stuff that you wouldn't normally celebrate. And it's that community, it's that support and that environment that can make all the difference for a lot of people.
I absolutely love that. Rachel, on the podcast, we always ask our guests one final question, which is, what does becoming more human mean to you?
Oh, do you know, I saw this on the thing and I was like, how am I going to answer this? And I think, becoming more human to me, I guess I have this little system that I sort of work through. And it's like awareness is the first step always, because if you don't know what's wrong, you don't know what you're thinking, you don't know what you're feeling, like you can't do anything about it because there's no awareness there. So I think becoming more human is like building awareness, getting brave, like being courageous and brave in the things that you can change and the things that you can't, accepting the things that you can't, and then making compassionate choices for yourself consistently. So, you know, what's the most compassionate thing that I can do for myself today? And at the start of my journey, it was like, just try and get out of bed. You know, now it's like, now it's much different. But at the beginning, it was just like, speak more kindly to yourself. You know, and so I think it's that thing of like building awareness, getting brave, getting out of your comfort zone, practicing things you haven't practiced before, but doing it with like a level of self-compassion and kindness, and knowing, like, especially if you've got depression or anxiety, these things, it's highly likely that you've experienced some kind of adverse life events or trauma, and those parts of ourselves just want to be loved. They had a really hard time. And actually, when you can look at those parts and just be like, okay, Freddie, look, I get it. You had a really hard time and it made you not want to live. But you know what? We're not having that hard time now. Look at this. We're in Rat Park. we don't need to don't need to drink all that cocaine-laced water anymore. We're in Rat Park. Like, life's good again, you know. But that part is still stuck in where he's stuck. And so it's just about going, you know, okay, you're part of me. You can come along for the ride, but like, you're not controlling anything anymore. So I think becoming more human, I guess, truth, expansion, compassion, maybe. Yeah, truth, expansion and compassion.
I'm Francesca and you've been listening to Becoming More Human, the podcast. You can follow Becoming More Human on Instagram, subscribe, rate and review the podcast on your podcast apps such as Spotify, Apple, Amazon and Google. And don't forget to check out our website for exclusive audio content on becomingmorehuman.co.uk. Join me next week for another inspiring conversation. Thank you for listening.